And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wartburg Infusion Entertainment Review. It's time for episode number 70. We've crossed the 69 threshold. I'm your host, Thomas, a.k.a. Mr. Wartburg. Alongside me, as always, is the other host, Patrick, a.k.a. Mr. Fusion.
Greetings and salutations, fans, listeners, podcasters, enthusiasts, Trekkies, all of it. Let's
Yes,
talk.
speaking of Trekkies, we're going to talk a lot of Trek today. So that's our
Yes.
kind of our log line for episode 70, is we're going to be talking about Strange New World Season 2. We're also going to talk about the situation in regards to Prodigy, which is the series that Paramount Plus has seemingly dumped in the trash bin and yet is still shopping around. It's a very weird situation. And a show that just got nominated for a Television Critics Award after this news came out, which is absurd. And they're not the only streamer in that situation. So we'll probably get into some topics about the state of streaming as we have for the last few months, especially in regards to the writer's strike. We're not going to touch on that too much. It'll definitely a back half of the podcast conversation. So stay tuned for that. I'll definitely have the timestamps as well in our links and descriptions. So we're probably going to start with one of the two Star Trek topics, and then we'll touch on some lighter entertainment news from around the industry, like the Superman and Lois casting. And we'll talk a little bit about where we're going with that, because we have some things to discuss. So, Fusion, of the two Star Trek topics we're going to discuss, your call, where are we starting?
I say let's start with Strange New Worlds, which is my new favorite show. Let's do this.
I concur, and I actually agree, it is perhaps my favorite currently airing show. So, Strange New World Season 2. They've up through episode 3. That aired yesterday. We are recording this on Friday, June 30th, right at the very end of the month. It's been an interesting Friday, of course, if you know anything about American news. Not going to touch on that at all, but man, it was a really weird day.
Yeah.
Yesterday was fantastic. I got up at 6 a.m. to watch Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which was a wonderful time travel Star Trek episode. Kind of story that they do super well, that fits super well in the Star Trek canon. Enterprise went a little heavy-handed with the whole temporal Cold War thing, like right out of the gate. Hey, we're doing a prequel, but also it's a temporal Cold War show, which was super fucking weird. But Strange New Worlds took some time to get to that kind of story, because we've gotten to know the characters a lot better. And
Yep.
man, this worked really, really well. So Fusion, what are your thoughts on Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow?
This one and Ad Astra, Perispera, wonderful back-to-back episodes. I really enjoyed the fact that I know some folks that may be listening, watch in the live stream right now, may not have watched all the episodes. So I'm sorry, some spoilers ahead. This is a James T. Kirk episode, which was really fun to see because I know he's not part of Strange New Worlds as a whole in terms of like primary cast, but we tease like what's his future. Great great episode, great writing here, great acting. Christina Chong, who plays Liana Noonien-Singh, Khan's ancestor, I guess the best way
Descendant.
to describe
That's the
it.
word.
Descendant. I'm sorry, not. I got
The
confused
opposite.
there.
Yeah.
That's bad. Yeah, I'm thinking because of the fact that we're like a previous of the original series, and I got a little thrown off there. Yes, an ancestor, descendant. I'm sorry, I said it again. Descendant. Um, I think the big thing here is the end result is we've kind of pushed the wars a
Yeah,
bit
it
in
has
terms
a
of the
lot
tone.
of implications for
Yes.
Trek lore itself. Kind of soft confirms some fan
Yep.
theories that have sprung up since the 90s Trek, like Voyager and Discovery, not Discovery, Deep Space Nine. And definitely, oh, Fusion's mic is a little low. Thank you, Pathos. I will kick that back up. It was just a little loud
And
in my headset.
okay,
I got you boosted.
go. All right.
I'll turn my own headset down.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Okay. So obviously we'll get into some spoilers here in a little bit, but they touch on some very interesting parts of Trek lore. So this episode you'd say is the best of the season so far?
Yes, I will. The first two episodes were really good, but this one was fantastic for me.
I agree. I'd say it's like I put in Discord, it's 10 out of 10 episode. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if it's all-time Mount Rushmore Star Trek, because that remains to be seen,
No.
but it's definitely in the conversation. You know, like I don't know if it'd be up there with like Best of Both Worlds, or like honestly I think Drumhead should be up there.
Okay.
I think that's the best courtroom one. Measure of a Man is great, don't get me wrong, but it's very early season Trek versus
Yeah.
like Drumhead. They're in their bag. Like it's season
Yeah.
4. They absolutely have the messaging nailed down. Patrick Stewart's at the top of his fucking game, right? So that's why I go with Drumhead. Plus, Drumhead is a little more timeless because of how history tends to repeat itself versus Measure of a Man. So I'd go Drumhead, maybe Duet. Maybe
Okay.
like even Voyager's got Year of Hell, which is just incredible two-parter. Um, and then obviously you've got like the City on the Edge of Forever. I mean, that won multiple sci-fi awards. So I don't know if it's in that conversation, but it's damn close.
Okay.
So so would you also say it's the best episode of the series so far, which is 1 season and 3 episodes now?
Which it wasn't the finale where Hammer dies
No, that's
in
episode
season
9
one.
with the
That's
Gorn.
9, right? Really loved that
That
episode,
was great.
episode 9.
That was a
That
great
was
like
a
alien
really good.
style in Star Trek, and it worked really well.
Yeah, and the ebbs and flows of that episode, and then at the very end, when right before, right before he dies, that where we're going. We both know, like, okay, this really feels like they're gonna set something major up, and then it's him of all people, like, oh shit, okay. Um, it just when we're starting to get like he was starting to really grow on me, right? So that was a really good episode last season, but um, yeah, I would say this is probably the best episode of this series so far. I would.
I agree.
Now that I think about that, just because there's so many elements here, we talk about like we talked about the timeline, which we'll go into detail a bit, but it pulls in several pieces, which is we've kind of been circling the Noonien-Singh family and like Liana's like heritage and the struggle she has with that. We've kind of danced around that in the first
And it's
season,
also even
and
shown up in
then
Picard with
yep,
the Soon's restarting of Project Khan.
yep,
Picard season 2, that teaser with that version of a Brent Spiner character. So it's definitely something Trek is focusing on, is kind of reworking some of that lore and really
yep,
mining it for some interesting stories. And famously in TOS, for those of you that are watching, this is where like legacy IPs kind of should maybe take a page from Star Trek here, in that yes, it's all quote unquote canon, but
mhm,
sometimes you just gotta roll with things and the audience will keep up. And
yeah,
this deep lore about like the eugenics wars
mhm,
is Exhibit A. So in TOS back in the day, Spock makes this offhanded thing, and then it occurs again in I think it's Wrath of Khan. They talk about the eugenics wars happening in specific time frame,
yep,
which are 1992 to 1996,
yep,
and that was basically hard canon for forever. It was essentially a precursor to World War III. It was like a shadow conflict between genetically augmented soldiers and leaders that were essentially controlling things behind, like an Illuminati type of war. And then
yep.
it eventually broke out into full on military conflicts into World War III. And then that period of time is called the Eugenics Wars. But what has happened is in like Voyager, they go back in time to 1997 and everything's normal. There's no wars, nobody's talking about anything, there's no mass destruction, nothing's going on. There was a fan theory that multiple different time travelers and different factions have gone back and kind of fudged things. Eventually, it all still is going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet. Things have moved, but it's going to happen. Yes, Pathos, you're right. It's the Sarah Silverman episode. Then Deep Space Nine kind of pulls the same thing. They go back to like, what was it, 2023 and like the Bell riots.
Yep.
And then Picard, they go back to the same time frame and kind of confirm that that's what's happening. So essentially, the Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Picard, and now Strange New World timeline, that's the same. The TOS stuff is essentially like, hey, this happened before major time travel event shit happened and fucked everything up. Alternatively, you could even make the case that TOS is in its own alternate universe. Everything else since is a different canon, which is wild, but also still technically possible.
It's possible. Yep.
But they're just rolling with it. Like they even lampshaded in the episode. They're like, this was supposed to happen in 1992, and I've been stuck here for 30 years trying to make the same damn war happen to stop humanity from becoming Starfleet and the Federation. And I love that they went there and they went with the. He's not in this show, but it was Terry Matalas who ran 12 Monkeys which was a time travel show, and the whole thing was time wants to happen. Time is a like sentient entity that wants to happen and doesn't like being fucked with. And they
I
kind of
think, yeah.
basically went with the same thing in Star Trek.
Yep.
And I love that interpretation of time travel.
Well, didn't we
Fantastic.
kind of established that the same thing with the MCU, right? Not to that degree that it's
To
just a
some of it, yeah.
ripple. It's a ripple, like you throw a stone in a pond. It's a
Yeah, but
ripple
they're
in the
not
pond
doing the Flashpoint version, which is that it goes in every direction. It's
in every direction.
yeah,
Yeah,
which is an interesting and very different conceit of time travel and multiple universes. They're not
yeah,
doing the multiverse. They're doing strict timeline stuff,
yep,
more in line to what the MCU proposed
yep.
in terms of mass media people might remember. But I absolutely dug the way that they handled that bit of lore. And also, this episode confirms that Riverside, Iowa is indeed the home birthplace of Captain
Uh,
Kirk,
Yep.
because that was never actually canon. Riverside actually petitioned, I think it was Paramount, to be designated that and to have like a recognized festival for Trek Fest, which happens every year in June. And I just missed it. I meant to go down, but man, I really felt like shit because I live in Iowa and it's like an hour and a half from me. Never actually been, and I definitely should. But now it's confirmed in canon. Riverside, Iowa is the birthplace of Captain Kirk and his brother.
Yeah, because in the Kelvin verse, we established that he's born in space, but he and his stepdad and his mom live in Iowa, but he wasn't born there. Like
Yeah, and then like in this
we're
new alt timeline,
he's
he's
born,
born
yeah,
on the Iowa.
The Iowa ship,
And
yeah,
I love that alt universe still has a USS Iowa because there's a
yeah,
new USS Iowa in today, modern Earth. They just renamed a Wolf, I think it's a Seawolf class sub, the USS Iowa, which was famously one of the most famous American battleships in World War II.
hmm
So it's a pretty cool ship. If I ever get out to, I think it's in San Francisco, that harbor. I think that's where the Iowa is. It might, no, it's not. It's not in Pearl Harbor. I think it's in San Francisco. Oh, it's LA. It's in California. It's in LA. Thank
it's
you,
in
Chris.
L.A.
If I ever get out there, I want to go see the Iowa. It's a cool ship. So, and I love that they kind of nodded to that even in an alternate timeline. So, speaking of the episode specifics, though, not just the lore of it all,
Sure,
got to give a huge shout out to Christina Chong's as Leon
yes,
Noonien-Singh. Holy shit. She absolutely carried this episode.
yes,
And
she
obviously,
did.
Paul Wesley was fantastic as an alt Kirk. And I really like that we're bringing in some more of the TOS version of Kirk and less the movie version of Kirk because
Yep,
Shatner kind of, it's a different character. TOS Kirk is a little more serious and by the book and isn't that, isn't Zap Brannigan, like that's not the character. And even wasn't in the 60s. All the male leads were kind of like that in the 60s. It's just how the industry was back then. Wasn't a specific Shatner Kirk thing. It was just basically everybody. So, and I appreciate that he's definitely watched a lot of Shatner stuff, like the whole like squinting when he's like getting serious thing, and like that's very like he got a lot of the mannerisms down. And I got to give a shout out to both of them because obviously it was basically a two-person show this week,
yep.
and they kicked a lot of ass. And I can't wait to see where that ends up going for future stories with those two characters because now we're back with Prime Kirk at the end of this episode. So what was your favorite takeaway from this week or just season 2 itself so far?
Um, I'm a little nervous because I think in the first 3 episodes we've seen a lot of Liana Noonien-Singh, and we both know. Well, first off,
Well, do you
I
know
think the
why
big
it's less Captain Pike?
why
He
why
just
was
had a
that?
baby. He had a baby right as they were starting to shoot.
Oh,
So he
okay,
was on
okay,
leave and would just come back to shoot certain scenes. And that's why we've had less Pike.
okay, okay. I
Which I
did
thought
not know
was, you
that.
know what? That's actually fantastic of Paramount to give their lead like, hey, go be with your kid. We
Well,
got a
we've
we got a great
established
cast.
we have a
We
great
got
cast.
this.
Let's explore that a little bit more. Obviously, and it was a fun opening episode to have a Spock, the acting captain.
That
And
cold open with the
yep,
I would think it was obvious. We must steal the Enterprise. It was like,
yeah.
oh fuck. Oh man, they're going there.
Um, but when I think about this, it's like, yeah, we're getting the ensemble stepping up, which is fine, and it makes sense now. I think the other thing though is that we're getting a lot more of Liana Noonien-Singh, which when I think about this is the 5-year window leading up to James Kirk taking over for the Enterprise. And remember, a lot of these folks aren't there. Christina Chapel, she's a part of the Enterprise at the beginning of the TOS. We know Spock, we know Uhura,
And Banga's around a
and
little bit, not a
a
consistent
little bit.
character.
And Vega, yeah, is not consistent. But then Liana's not there. Number one, I forget her,
Una
Una
Chin
Chin
Riley.
Riley. She's not there. We know what happens to Pike if you've watched the TOS, but obviously something's going to happen in the next couple of years to where Lyanna's not going to be around,
Mhm.
and I think they're setting up for her to have a very tragic fall at some point in the next season or so. And the other rumor I saw was apparently Paramount is interested as they're looking to start piecemealing and selling off these properties, which we'll talk about in a minute, because of the success of Strange New Worlds and how like it's captivated people. They're talking about moving it from a show to the next movie series. And I like that idea, but I think we could be setting ourselves up for it has to well, it has to be done right. Let me put it like this.
I
It
do
has to
think
be done
there's an
right.
avenue for it. It would. I don't want to say they need to remake anything TOS. They
No.
don't. But you're gonna have a new Kirk. He's the right age for it. You could absolutely tell a year one of Captain Kirk story with a lot of the same cast, because in the TOS that starts year two of him as captain. So
That's
you
true.
could do like a year one with Kirk kind of story, and then maybe come back and do. I think there's parts of TOS you could redo though, like the Menagerie, which is when Spock steals the Enterprise to help Captain Pike. Like, if they're gonna end cap this timeline that they're focusing on with a big event, I think that would be a wonderful episode to do it on, and like kind of recontextualize what that looks like with today's technology and the characters and actors we've come to like really care for. That would be an awesome story to essentially not remake but reimagine with this new lore and canon and this new technology and the cast and the crew. I think it'd be really cool to give Pike that send off with everybody else, and like it would also give us a new, like Scotty and we check off and like a year one kind of story could tell us
Yep.
how he like getting to know the cast and like of the original TOS. You get your Chekhov, you get your Sulu, you get your Scotty. We already know Uhura, we already know Spock. And then those two that we know, getting to know this new Kirk as captain and gelling as a bridge crew.
Yep.
I think you could do either a series, I think a 10 episode series of that would be very cool because you could still have Commodore Pike show up. You could still have other characters pop in and out. We do that season, and then you wrap up with a time jump, redo the menagerie, and then you could also tell stories after TOS, between movies and TOS. There's a lot of time there that doesn't get touched on.
Yep.
There's
It's
the animated series, but and some comic stuff that you could essentially just hand wave away because you should.
but didn't they say that the cartoon isn't canon?
I thought they did. I can't remember
I
what the
could
status of that is.
I could have sworn that they said that the cartoon was initially supposed to be canon, but then they decided to say no, it's not canon.
Yeah, like there's more stories to tell, and obviously this Enterprise looks awesome.
Yeah,
Like
I love
this,
this
the
Enterprise.
the season episode one of this season has so many awesome money shots that are like, God damn, this show's fucking incredible. Like it should not be this good. It's got 16 EPs. That's insane. It's incredible. Absolutely love this show.
Well, here's the big thing. Uh, Talking about Liana
Leon,
Noonien-Singh,
Laan.
Leon,
It's like Laan.
Laan, Laan, Una Chin Riley, Ortega. Those
Oh, I
are
forgot about
important.
Ortegas. Yeah.
Yeah, Ortega. She's great, but then what happens to bring Sulu aboard? Hikaru Sulu. You can tell that story leading up to it to the two films, but I think my thought is how much longer does Paramount want to have this as a show? Because aren't they in the process of getting ready to start filming season three?
Well, they're ready to. They're obviously
They're ready
stopping with
for
the
the strike.
strike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They were ready to. They were ready to start right away.
Yeah, like
So
season two, they started as soon as season one wrapped. They were like, "Hey, take a small break. We're coming right back."
yeah. So there's there's so many different stories to tell. I think, like you said, between TOS and the motion picture is what, in terms of their time, like actual timeline is what I think 12, 14,
It's
15
got to
years
be, yeah, it's at
somewhere.
least 10.
I think it's like 10 to 15, somewhere between 10 and 15 years. Okay. I think this would be I like the idea of like doing a handoff season to the TOS crew, the Kirk crew, but you have to. I don't know if I really want a movie of that going forward though, just because I really
That's the
like
only thing
Anson
I'm
Mount.
like, I think that's just the finale. We see Kirk's new crew, and then maybe we're done. You
Okay.
know? Like, and
Right.
maybe it's the new crew and Paul Wesley giving these are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise to kind of like this is the baton passing.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen on screen. We're not going to see it, again beyond maybe some movies and stuff or short form stuff here and there. Like the short trek could come back. I love those short treks; they were fantastic. So that's interesting. And again, it comes back to what does Paramount even look like as a company in 3 years?
Well, especially with this merger taking place right now with Showtime.
Well, it's
Like
not a
we don't.
merger; it's just a collaboration.
It's a no. They're calling it a merger. Like
Oh, it
I've
is a
seen a
full
couple of
merger.
there. I've seen a couple of
Did I miss the fact that Paramount bought Showtime,
I think it's an actual merger,
or is it? Or they're
not.
just the same company? Does Viacom
Um,
own both?
I think Viacom owns both,
Oh well, then it's not. And it's like
but
it's like saying what happened with
they
Max was a merger. It
yeah,
wasn't. It was like a kit bash of a bunch of shit.
they're calling it a merger. A few sites I was looking at today called it a merger. So um, I do believe Showtime is owned by Viacom
Okay, well then yeah,
because yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, because on CBS is where they would show Dexter and Weeds edited
true.
heavily
Again,
heavily
this gets
edited.
back to the
Yeah,
fact that why did Showtime have its own service?
yeah.
Why did Paramount have its own service? Why does CBS have its own service? And obviously that was with the split with Viacom. But like all these things that sprung up were so short term and short sighted, and now we're getting some consolidation, and we're getting some dominoes falling, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
Probably with story number two. Do
Um,
we want to go there, or
yeah.
do you have any
Let's
more to
go
talk
to
about with
no, no, no.
Strange New
I
Worlds?
this was an amazing episode. It does push timeline a bit, which makes sense just because, you know, actual real world time is moving on, so you have to adjust things to make it fit better for storytelling's sake. But I expect us to see a lot more going forward of of Pike and Spock, just because I think their stories were really good going into the end of into the finale last season. But also, man, we do a lot of time traveling. We did a lot in Picard. We did a lot here. We've done it in Discovery. Like we do a lot of time traveling in the Star Trek universe. Let's be real. Like
Well,
there's
it's
a lot
also a
of it.
main movie plot point.
Yep.
Like it's one of the old hats of Star Trek.
Oh, let's see. We're talking about the TOS movies as well as the Kelvinverse
We'll say
movies. Like it's
Voyager, Deep Space
yep,
Nine did it, Enterprise did it.
yep,
Yeah, it's a well worn trope of Star Trek, and it's one that they continue to do well. It's
yeah.
definitely a universe that lends itself to time travel and that kind of timey wimey. It's much like Doctor Who. It's definitely a it works, don't worry about it kind of thing,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
does. Like that doesn't feel ham fisted.
yeah.
So
Uh,
speaking of ham fisted, let's talk about how Paramount is handling Prodigy. Oh, what a
Oh, good
segue!
lord.
That was fantastic. I'm gonna mark that. That was a great one.
Mark that on tape. That's a
So
classic.
that was a great segue. So obviously, if you haven't seen the news, Prodigy is their Star Trek's kind of kid-focused IP. It's got
Yep.
a bunch of kid characters that stumble upon this starship that I think was sent to help rescue Voyager back in the day. I can't remember the actual lore. I haven't watched it. I meant to, but I can't now because they pulled it for a fucking tax write-off. And they even like it was a show that got Kate Mulgrew to come back as captain, and then Admiral Janeway, which is fantastic. And they pulled it. It's Star Trek, the flagship IP of the entire company. Hey, we need that tax write off. That is very worrying in a number of ways. And also a really shit move because they're also trying to shop a second season of a serialized show. It's not an episode of the week kind of show. It is a little bit, in the sense that all Star Trek shows are, but it's definitely got a lot of through lines that carry through with the characters. It's not a procedural. It's a little more involved than that. And who's going to watch season 2 without season 1? Who's going to buy that? How are you going to sell season 2 if you're trying to get a tax write off that says, hey, this is worthless, we need to get rid of it? It's very weird. So, Fusion, what are your thoughts on the Prodigy situation?
Um, it getting nominated for an award was just hilarious to
That
me.
was so good.
That's great. I think we talked about this in show prep, and it does worry me just because looking through things, you see that Disney this quarter is going to do this write off of about $1.5 billion of show IP to claim this tax credit. But then it opens up a question of how can we move forward with things in terms of like if like Paramount has already stated that a lot of these shows that they've canceled, they're going to shop them. That's what they've stated. But they haven't said shop future seasons. They just say shop the shows around to other streaming services, maybe
Kind of
back
like
to
just
over
like,
to
hey, we're gonna
Netflix.
throw the library at Netflix like they
Yeah.
used to do.
Yep. And my question is like, how can we do this if because it's let me pull this up because it's the what are we calling this? What is the tax write off? It's called a. Did I look this
It
up
was the
right?
deadline article.
Yes, the deadline article and the content impairment charge, which essentially the company will say this product, like let's just say with Paramount Plus, Pink Lady, Rise of the Pink Ladies, is has no value. We're writing off what spent on it, which was let's say for a season of 10 episodes, let's just say they spent $100 million for it, right? I'm sure that's probably high for this particular IP, but let's just say it was $100 million. They will then write off that $100 million and say, "Hey, we did this production, we spent this much money, but it's worthless in the open marketplace. It is worthless. So we are taking a tax loss on this. Okay, so we can write this completely off. Okay, so they get $100 million credit their financials for this year. But let's say they go turn around and sell it to Netflix, which they've stated, like you said, you're wondering how this works because, and I don't know, because it is new. It's new frontier for us to hear about this. They go to Netflix, they sell Rise of the Pink Ladies to Netflix. Do they get season one
Do they have to
because
pay
it's
that money
now?
back to the state
Do they have to
or
pay
the
to the
Fed to the
state?
IRS?
Like, how does Paramount, like, let's say Paramount turns around and flips this to Netflix and Netflix buys it for $50 million? Does Paramount then claim $50 million in revenue on this asset that they took a write off of $100 million the year before? Like, so basically, it's double dipping to me because they're getting $100 million in tax credit and then selling it again a year later. We both know that if they sell this to another streaming service like Hulu or Netflix, that we won't see this show for at least the rest of the year, right?
Agreed. And if
I'm very
anyone, my
curious.
money would be on Netflix because it feels very Netflix targeted,
Yeah,
like in terms of the market.
I'm using it as an example,
Yeah, I just
but
agree.
but it does sound like a double dipping, and that really bothers me because, like I said, I go and I look this up, and I hear that for Q2, Disney is going to write off $1.5 billion in impairment charges for IP that they are basically saying is now worthless. Okay, so if they go make money off of that, they've gotten a $2 billion tax credit. To me, we both say this, and I agree with this. When you said this, it sounds like a bailout because they got in over their heads over the last 4 or 5 years. Just trying to produce so much content, whether it be because of COVID and theaters were closed for a year plus, or no matter what it was, they obviously are trying to create a bottleneck of production to save money because they see that the theaters are now open back up and they're making money again. That's where studios really like the money. That's where they don't like it as much as shows, and it hurts even more because they don't get commercial incentive. They're not. It's not incentivized with commercials anymore, like The Big Bang Theory or popular network TV
Yeah, it's
shows,
not
because
ad supported. They
it's
didn't do ad supported, which I always thought
no.
was dumb that they
Yep.
don't have that tier. Netflix just did an ad support tier. Like
Yep.
Hulu had that 15
Well,
years ago.
but even if because Paramount does have an ad tier, don't they? I thought they do have an
Do
ad
they have an
tier.
ad tier?
Yeah,
I
they have a
literally just don't know.
yeah, they have a basic ad tier, but the thing is that streaming revenue off of ad revenue is nowhere near what it's. We're talking about a fraction of network
And again,
television.
because it's not valuable because the numbers aren't there. The
It's
advertisers
just
get to
yeah.
see the numbers. That's
Yep.
why it's not worth it,
Yep.
which should be very
Eh,
telling for the future of all these streaming services.
well, and it shows you like where advertisers and marketing reps really don't have a value on those huge streaming numbers. Like because right now, like
Yeah,
in
they
the
don't
old
give a
days,
shit about the watch time numbers.
the watch time
They
is the
want
big number.
actual
Yeah.
views.
Yeah. They want to see
They
unique
want the
views, right?
streaming version of Nielsen ratings.
Yep.
And those numbers just probably aren't there.
And someone who worked in media for 10 years, I will tell you, Nielsen and Arbitron are the most archaic.
Yeah,
They're just idiotic. They're
yeah.
idiotic numbers, but they were concrete and they generated billions upon billions for decades. And so switching over to this model, and it's hard for them to put a value on this because to them it's like it's not as tangible data as Arbitron and
Even though it's
Nielsen
on
ratings.
like even though realistically it's
It's
probably
real
more
time.
accurate.
Yeah, it's more real-time data, right? But like rather than like, oh, for one person watching on network TV, they represent 10,000 people, which that whole process
It
of
was
it's all
very, it's
stupid.
so dumb.
Look, I don't like the idea of double dipping, and it does feel like a
And I do
bailout.
wonder, there, I'd have to research what state is involved. I do wonder if either if it's the state of California that they're doing this in, they're gonna be on their ass on the
Oh
books
yeah,
in terms
Gavin
of
Newsom's gonna
they're
come
gonna
for
like
them.
if you're gonna
Yeah.
write it off, cool. You don't make a cent off this.
Yep,
You pull all the Blu-rays. You don't sell a fucking dime of this.
yep.
Otherwise, it's not worthless.
Yeah,
Like
because I don't
that
know.
would not shock me if either the state or the IRS is eventually going to have to tighten up some of these guidelines.
You brought up a really good point here because a lot of streaming services don't put out physical media of the
Paramount
shows,
does.
right?
I don't know if they
Paramount
did for
does,
Prodigy. They did for Strange New Worlds, and I'm going to buy the 4K Blu-ray
but
because of this exact situation.
we have to keep an eye of the hit list for Disney because if they start putting that stuff on physical media, then it's triple dipping essentially,
Yeah, that's
you
what's
know?
probably going to save them is from any repercussions is because they don't do the physical anymore for their streaming IP, which I always think is crazy because oh my god, the Marvel diehards would buy all the stuff.
Oh
So
yeah,
would the Star Wars.
Loki would have sold like mad if they bought it
Hell
on
yeah,
put it
I'd
on
have bought the
4K
4K
Blu-ray.
Blu-ray of Loki. That show looked amazing.
Yeah.
That was fantastic, and the soundtrack alone, awesome.
It's a really tough, very dangerous area we're in right now because they're trying to cut cost and increase their profit margins. They want everything to move back into theaters. That's really why the studio at Paramount, the studio execs want they see Stranger New Worlds and how popular it is. They want to move that
That
over
said, I think
to
they're
the
misjudging
theater.
how popular that would be translated to the big screen.
Yep.
That's always been Trek's issue.
Yep.
It worked in the 80s because you had some star power there in terms like the actors had become famous and stayed famous, because of the original show. I don't know if that's going to happen in the modern era with all the different shows that are happening. It's
But
so
all of
much
the
more
movies never
diluted.
really did well. But all the
They
movies
never
have never
they
really
did
done
okay
well.
and they were cheap.
They
Like
did,
they weren't
yeah,
incredibly, expensive. Like TMP was actually pretty expensive for the time just
yeah.
because of how long it took for them to make the damn thing. But
Mhm.
there were actually some lawsuits involved in some of the special effects. But
Oh yeah.
like they weren't trying to compete with Star Wars. They were telling Trek stories. And then Trek in the Kelvinverse started to try to compete with those, and it doesn't work. I really hope the execs remember Stranger Worlds is working because it feels like goddamn Trek. It feels like your dad's Trek, but good. Like that was kind of the whole thing with the Kelvin stuff is this isn't your daddy's Star Trek anymore. And then it didn't succeed. Even Discovery kind of felt that way. But Strange New Worlds does feel like that. And it definitely shows that that still works. I just don't know if that works at the box office anymore.
I don't think so.
I don't.
I don't think so. Because Star Trek Beyond is a very, very good Star Trek
I
movie.
agree. I
And
love that
and it
movie.
and it did not do very well at the box office. So I think Star Trek is an IP that doesn't do very well in that space.
It thrives in the serialized television
Yep.
format and the
Yep.
episodic format. Like
Yeah.
that is what made it so good is that
Yep.
it fits that mold so perfectly.
You have the ability to really bond and latch on to characters and with this with an entire season, right? And we don't need 20 plus episodes like network TV. 10 episodes a season of 50 minutes on a streaming service
Or
like
like this week's was
Paramount does.
61. It
It
was
was
awesome.
61 minutes this week. It was like, holy shit, this is a long one. Um, but like you have the ability to like really have these characters grow on you. And here's the other thing: you could get 5 seasons out of this show, so 3 more after this, and it'd be your flagship for Paramount Plus. It can be, but I really think that unfortunately Paramount is they're looking at how, oh
That
look, we have
said,
all.
if they start doing movies for their streaming service,
Now that's an
essentially
issue.
2-part episodes slash 2 hours, like try to hit that 100-minute window. I think that's
Yeah.
the perfect amount for a Trek movie, especially with what they can do and the money it's going to cost. But I think they could tell a very fun story and just do, like say you're going to take a long break between 3 and 4. and you're probably going to have to at this point because of the writer's
Yeah,
strike.
their strike. Yeah.
You could definitely probably put like, hey, after 3, take a small break, then we're going to shoot this in between thing, but it's going to be 18 months before we see the next season. Like, and in between, like in that 9 month before, 9 month after window, that's when we get that kind of movie. I could actually see that being successful because it would let you kind of like I want to say it was Netflix did with, was that Luther, the Idris Elba show, where like
Yeah.
it would be 5 years between seasons, but
Yep.
they would do some kind of events every now and then. Psych does that now, but with post show movies. They just kind of showed up. Stargate used to do that. That's another more analogous kind of comparable probably is that they did 2 movies and they were going to do a third and then it got canceled. That was Continuum and Arc of Truth. Yeah,
Mhm.
but like they did movies and like it worked. Like those were very fun in-universe stories told in movie format. It could work. It just don't. And then give them a limited, do those like Fathom events that they do sometimes for old Trek
Yeah.
stuff. Do a limited run with that. I'd go see that if I lived close enough to a theater, and then also just it's day and date streaming. I think that'd be pretty cool.
No, you're right. I mean, Fathom events like the Draft House doing the flashback movies. I
Yeah, like
think that there's
pick a chain like just like a Draft House type chain.
yeah, yeah.
That's your one retailer for the theaters.
Yep. I think that would be great because I have seen Star Trek in the Draft House. I saw Wrath of Khan a few years back, and it was an incredible experience to be able to watch a classic like that. I watched They Live last summer, right? Ghostbusters on Halloween. It's a great experience to be able to sit down again, and it's nostalgic, but it's awesome to see. Like you remember, I've seen this movie dozens of times at home, but it's like, oh yeah,
But there's just something
this was
different in the theater.
it was fucking great. And they live is like, okay, it's a man movie, but it's pop culture, it's pulp, right? But then when you see it in the theater, you're like, oh my god, like I
It
totally remember
works.
this
Yeah.
as a kid. It's like that's why I like cinema. For everything's not a banger. It's just some shit's just pure fun. That's why like Rise of the Beast was. It's not a banger, but it's fun. And I think I get why they want to go back to that because their overhead is greatly cut down versus a show, right? But I think Star Trek would suffer. I'm not. I mean, let me clarify myself. Star Trek shows like IP's trying to move over. It may have worked for TOS. I didn't really like the TNG movies as much as the TOS movies.
Oh, I think that's
Um,
fairly standard.
yeah. I think as wonderful as this cast is, I think about like seeing these guys on
That
the
and like
big
some of these
screen.
people are going to be very popular. Like Ethan Peck is going to explode off this.
Yeah.
Like
I think Ethan Peck's going to be the next big casting in an MCU film. I think he will be.
yeah,
He may
unless they
even be.
finally do an Inhumans thing and give Anson Mount his actual shot,
Oh God, let him actually be Black Bolt.
or just
Um,
have him be a different character. He's
Ethan
so
Peck.
good.
It's Ethan. Is it Ethan Beck or Peck?
It's
I
Peck.
keep
He's
saying Peck.
Gregory
Is it?
Peck's grandson.
Yeah, Gainstone, right?
Which is I
Ethan.
didn't even I knew that in the back of my head I
The
knew it,
voice,
and then
man.
I
The
saw it on
voice.
Reddit and I was like, holy fuck, this dude is Greg Peck's grandson. Holy fuck, this dude's
I
Hollywood
mean,
royalty.
he's got his granddad's voice, man. Seriously, he
Yeah,
does. Um,
and he's
Ethan.
playing a Leonard Nimoy character.
Yep.
Like, dude, he's gonna do whatever the fuck he wants in Hollywood.
He's going. I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it now. He's gonna be Doctor Doom. He's gonna be Doctor Doom.
I could see
He's
that.
got the.
I was just
He's
gonna
got
say
the
he's gonna
presence,
get
man.
that post supernatural Jensen Ackles. He's awesome bump.
Yeah.
Like that's what's gonna happen with
I
him.
could I could see him being Doctor Doom. Back to this whole thing. It's a mess, man, and I don't like the fact that we're talking about billions of dollars being cut from their expense, their P&L report to help incentivize their profit margins and their dividends on their stocks, and then turn around and sell this stuff again. Like there, I think you're right. If this is based in California, I can see the governor, I can see Gavin Newsom coming after them and saying like, we can't, especially when we talk about billions of dollars for just one studio alone with Disney. Talking about what Paramount's going to save here with all these shows, and then what HBO is saving this year for all the shows they canceled. It's going to bring a lot of things to the forefront, and I hope to see legislation take effect that kind of goes after the studios. Just because if there's anything that angers me more than anything as a movie lover and as a show lover, is that studio execs are just they make the process so much worse. The more you see interviews over the years of actors currently and back in the day talk about their struggles in Hollywood, the one common denominator of their stress is always Hollywood executives. Like
And like
studio execs.
just and to follow up, the what's always like, did you know Men in Black has never technically turned a profit?
Yep, I know.
Which is
Yeah.
absolutely fucking absurd. The number of times it's been sold on streaming, it's been played on streaming, played on syndication over the airwaves, never turned a profit. Are you insane, Hollywood? That's the kind of shit that needs to actually be cleaned up in terms of the tax code. Like,
Yep.
that shouldn't be legal. That's fraud. To say that movie never turned a profit. It absolutely has. Everybody fucking knows it.
Yep.
But they just keep their books so buttoned up, nobody looks at them. And I do wonder if the streaming bubble crashing maybe gives, not Congress, maybe it's the IRS, maybe it's, whatever entity and getting involved here, actually finally gets in there and be like, no, you're going to do that. We're cleaning the shit up. It's been, 70 plus years. It's time to fix it. So,
Yeah, I think we'll be looking back 10 years from now and saying, "Hey, that little stretch there of like 4, 5, 6 years, there was some great shows. Like, oh, there was a gluttony of high quality content that came out." But I think we mentioned this a couple podcasts ago. Over the next few years, though, it's going to bottleneck, and we're going to get
we're starting to see it.
starting to spread it out a lot more, which I'm okay with, because a 45-year-old man, I've got a lot of other things to do, and but I want to watch everything because it's all good shit. It's all great stuff to watch. But yeah, if you start sprinkling that stuff, then I'm like, okay, I can manage my content better. So it's beneficial all around. But at the end of the day, we both know what drives everything in this country: the almighty dollar, man, and
And
that's really it.
yeah, yeah, I was actually having this discussion on the Star Trek Reddit with some fellow redditors, and I was mentioning, what I could see happening is Paramount licensing the IP out, much like they used to. They obviously have tried to do their own channels before. They tried UPN, like stuff
Yeah.
like that. It never worked. I could see them licensing it out to like an Amazon or an Apple, because Apple's doing some very focused and awesome sci-fi content. Speaking of Silo Fusion, its season 1 is done. Pathos, you're not gonna, because you don't like Apple TV. Silo fucking ruled, man. That show was awesome. Like, Rebecca Ferguson, probably gonna win awards for this. Tim Robinson, definitely. No, Tim Robbins, not Robinson. Tim Robbins, definitely should. Like, even Common wasn't bad in this show. Like, he was the perfect cast for that type of role. Watch Silo. It is excellent sci-fi. I could see one of those two as a big player for licensing the Paramount IP in terms of specifically Star Trek, because they've got a lot of shows that are in that vein. They've handled similar IP well. Obviously, you've got genre shows on Amazon doing very well. And I could see them kind of us getting back to what Hulu was originally, which is that all the major players come together and we're just going to license it. But instead of being a shared company, I could see one company, one player, or maybe two players, maybe even three, coming out and be like, no, we're going to be the hub. We're going to pay to license everything else. And then you just make the show for us and we pay you. And it makes everybody money, much like the network model used to. It was expensive and it didn't make all the money in the world, but it did work for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I could see them going back that road, especially like on the Mac side, that debt is going to catch up to them.
Yeah.
Like, we hit a recession, oh boy. Like, that debt's going to catch up fast. Because the interest rates are already kicking their ass. Like, if the Fed gets crazier, look out. That's going to be wild. Paramount's in a different boat. They don't have the huge debt service load, right? AT&T didn't saddle them with a bunch of garbage, right?
No.
They've got their own head up their ass bullshit to deal with, but they're not in that bad of a situation. But clearly pulling Paramount, pulling Prodigy to save money, shopping it around to different places, and hey, Viacom's finally going to condense all their IP as much as they can into one service. That kind of tells me dominoes are starting to fall on the back end of, hey, we're consolidating, we're shopping things around, we're licensing things out, we're making big tax write-offs. That doesn't spell great things for the industry in terms of the state of everything.
I think the only interesting thing here is that most of these these networks and these conglomerates that own these IPs have their own studios. Universal Comcast, right? Warner Brothers slash HBO slash Discovery, Paramount slash Showtime, Viacom, all of that. So the only thing I can see happening, and it's kind of funny because I was talking with someone today about sports related and football and the NFL package and college football. I think Amazon's going to be our next. It's going to be our first online cable company. I think it's going to be Amazon. The reason why is because Bezos and company,
Well,
they have the
technically,
cash to
you
really.
technically YouTube's already doing that.
Well, YouTube TV, yes, but YouTube TV still broadcast over the air network television, so to speak. Like
Yeah, they have
they're,
your
they're
locals.
they have our locals versus I think Amazon actually is in the process of working on locals, if I'm not mistaken.
If they're not working on a live service, I would eat this hat I'm wearing.
But I think Amazon's going to be that first online cable company. You know, when I say cable company, you know what I mean. Like they're going to be what Comcast or what Time Warner Cable was. You know, in terms of like in-home coaxial services, they're going to be that conglomerate of networks and services. You know, all in one shop. I think they'll be the first one because Amazon has the cash to be able to take all of that up front and then sort it out on the back end.
Yeah, because they print money.
Yeah, Netflix doesn't have that. You know,
And the only
Amazon
other one
does
that
have
would
it.
is Apple, but they don't seem like they want to.
They don't seem like they want to. They seem like they're content in their own little space, except for the fact that they did baseball and they don't do
And they have
baseball.
Major League Soccer.
Yeah. They don't do baseball very well from like a broadcaster standpoint. Like the actual show itself, like the production is good, but like the play by play and all of that stuff, like their
Honestly,
directors are
that's
not
because
very
the
good.
best ones are still locked up in their RSN contracts.
That's true, but then ESPN they're laid
Yeah.
off a bunch of like
But like speaking
heavy
of the
people
twins, like
today.
Burt
Yeah.
Blyleven and like Justin Morneau have contracts with Bailey. Like they can't
Yeah.
do third parties, and they're
But
fantastic for twins.
Bailey's going under, isn't it?
Oh yeah, like if they survive in a 24, I'll be stunned
Yeah.
in terms of
Um,
mass majority of the teams.
we'll see, but I think like with a heavy load of ESPN legacy layoffs like
It's gonna be a
today,
weird year because like
I,
NBC, CBS, you got to wonder if they're licking their chops because they have CBS Sports, it's growing,
yep, yep.
and they have the new Big Ten package, and
But
like
also, but Amazon has football. They have college football and
exactly.
NFL, and they have some premier names, but they do a great
Yeah, the
production
streaming side of
online.
sports, as much as we've been talking Trek nerds,
Yep,
but sports streaming is going to drive a lot of the future conversation in terms of
yep,
what platforms do survive and what don't,
yep.
because there's nothing that gets views like sports in terms of media, whether that be OTA, traditional cable, streaming. Sports is the one constant that is the gold standard of this gets people to fucking watch
And well, and the
and
production is
spend
cheap.
money.
Yep, and the production is cheap for sports. It's
Yeah,
it's a lot cheaper than studio product.
yeah, you
You
don't
don't have
need
as
key grips and set
yep,
dressers. Like, I mean, you need some people working on sets, but like, you don't need hundreds of people behind the camera for a 5-person shot. Like that's just it's a way more streamlined product that makes more money.
yep.
That's why it's going to be driving a lot of the success of what's going to happen.
And I think just be able to look out because my feeling is Amazon's probably going to be that first company to really take
Oh
that
yeah,
step
I mean,
and being
obviously you see what they're doing with NFL on Thursday nights. Like
yep,
they're testing those waters and to see number one how much appetite their audience is. Like they're looking for the data, but they also want to see if they have the appetite for it.
well, they also own the servers.
Yeah, like they
They
run AWS,
yes,
and
they
Microsoft's
have
not a
running there and
competitor.
everything.
Azure is not
Nope,
a competitor.
no,
Like Microsoft's not in that space at all. They are
nope,
the player. Apple's there a little bit, but again, they don't want that. They're not doing that. Google, they're out of the game, right? In terms of that kind of server stuff, they're just not doing that. They
yep,
obviously could pivot and do it, but it's Google. They don't stick with things. No one's gonna invest in that long term. Not with Google. I don't think Google wants that. They're just not that kind of company. Amazon is, especially with the new direction post Bezos. So like I could see that happening for sure. And I could see a lot of our legacy IPs, like your Star Treks, showing up as a dedicated channel on Amazon.
yeah.
Because they do that with like HBO, and I think Showtime had channels, and Stars has a channel on Amazon. I could see a Paramount channel on Amazon, and you
And
know, it's an
how
add-on.
would
Like
you how would you feel about that? Like, both you, I cut the cord a long time ago, right? 10 plus years ago, I
Same
cut the
here.
cord.
We've been streaming
How would you,
since
how would
2017.
you feel? How would you feel having to go through a virtual cord in that you have one bill to like Amazon for all these services? Would
That'd
you
be
be
fine. I
cool with
already
that?
kind of pay that. Like,
Yeah.
I pay Hulu for my TV and I add in HBO. Like, I kind of already do that,
Mhm.
and I have a few extras like Paramount and Netflix that are separate, but if they start to bundle together with each other, wouldn't bother me at all. As long as they maintain the consistency of you can add and change on a dime. As long as they maintain that, it is leaps and bounds better than cable ever was. Period. As long as they maintain that and if they can make it a little more consolidated, I actually think that's better for the mainline consumer than it is for like you and me who are very plugged in. Like we're doing a
Yeah.
podcast live
Yeah.
streaming on Twitch. Like we are plugged in.
Yeah.
For most people like my parents that are not, I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
It'd
Like
make
my
as long as
parents.
they need to
Yeah.
work on the UI then if they're going to do that. Like it needs
Yep.
to be
They
very
do.
much more traditional cable for that look. Or they need that kind of that TV guide kind of like this is what you're doing explanation. Otherwise it's going to be a mess. You're going to have
Yeah.
and Amazon's been caught doing this where they sign people up for things they didn't want.
Hmm.
Like that needs to be buttoned up. But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Because obviously we're finding that and studios are finding that doing it on your own isn't always profitable, is it?
No.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a there's different layers to this conversation. Obviously, the financial side of it, in terms of like the tax breaks and the write-offs, that's a big deal. But the future of streaming, we've had multiple podcasts talking about this recently, where things are going to head. At least we're in a better place now than 6 months ago when we were talking about how studios, to save money, were just going to remove IP and it was just going to be missing permanently. Things that we now it's a possibility those IPs can be licensed somewhere else, right? If you really want to go through an old Star Trek library, Paramount says, okay, we've removed all of that from our servers and you can't access it. But Amazon's like, you can pay for $5.99 a month and have all the old school Star Trek you can ever handle. Like, okay, sure. I could see it being a little more palpable and having a one stop shop makes a lot of sense. Like you said, for the casual end user, it makes a lot of sense. I
mhm.
think for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years
And
now,
then once you
the
do
big
that,
yeah,
that's when the ad tier is going to make bank.
the
Once you
action,
do
yeah,
that, because it's
yep,
so diluted right now.
yeah,
Once it starts to consolidate, the ad tier becomes much more viable
yeah.
because you're going to have more consistent users.
But that means they have to film a little differently for a lot of shows to make sure they hit those stopping points for commercial breaks. Just because,
That's
as
honestly
it
one of the reasons
stands,
I like Stranger Worlds. They film that way. Like you can tell,
yeah,
oh, that's where they would put a break in. Like, well,
yeah,
that's where they'd put a break in, and it flows seamlessly,
yeah.
but it works. Like you could absolutely tell, oh, this show could air on CBS and it'd be amazing. So, and I can't believe it doesn't. I can't believe they don't put it a year later on CBS, like or something like that. Like, really? It would kill. It'd be amazing,
Ins- Instead, they put it on YouTube for free.
right? Like, really? I mean,
Just
okay,
run it.
I ain't gonna hate. I love. It's way
Yeah,
easier to share a YouTube link than hey, find a way to watch CBS. But
CBS
like,
network. Yeah.
it was so weird when they did that. All right.
But
So, anything else you
you're
want to?
right. You're right, man. I think we're going to get to a point to where there's going to be a massive shift. It'll be it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yep. So, speaking of stuff, and we're speaking of legacy IPs, one I'm very excited to watch. I believe it comes out Friday. My Adventures with Superman, starring Jack Quaid. That's going to be a very fun show. I've seen some of the preview stuff. It's like, oh, this looks really good. And some people that I follow have seen some screeners are like, it's great Superman storytelling. Like, yes, Golden Age Superman is back. I'm so excited, and he's having a moment. Like the Superman IP is kind of having a big moment, like we said in our pre-show. You got new version of Supergirl that everyone agrees is like the best part of the Flash. Superman and Lois kicking ass in season 3, introducing an amazing Lex Luthor, doing the Doomsday fight, probably setting up Death of Superman. Spoilers, but it looks fantastic, especially for a show as cheap as they're making this show. They got their budget cut so hard they had to fire cast members,
And
and they
they're
still
doing
put out this.
well in the final season. It's only 10 episodes. I think three-quarters of the current cast won't be back.
Yeah, like
Like
they're
it's
doing a way streamlined show,
yeah,
and they're basically going to try to pull off Reign of the Superman, like the return of Superman.
With just scraps at this point.
But
Yeah.
knowing them, it will probably work
Yeah.
because they pulled off a great Bruno Mannheim. They did an awesome like Superman's like dealing with the fact that his wife has cancer. Like, what does Superman do in that moment? Which is a great Superman story, and like they're telling those kind of stories. And we got this new Superman show, and we have a new Superman and Lois casting for the Prime DC Universe movie universe.
Yep.
And everybody seems to agree that it's a pretty good cast,
Yep.
which is insane because even in the DCU, which all turned out to be pretty good casts, you know, with Momoa, and honestly, I liked Affleck. Even I think Miller was a good cast for a badly written role. You know, Gal was fantastic as Wonder Woman. Cavill got nothing to do with Superman, even though he was a great character actor for Superman. Got nothing to do with the role, which sucked. And everyone still agrees. And we couldn't agree then that these were all great casts, even though they ended up turning out pretty good. Everyone agrees this one's really good, which almost makes me worried. But I don't know if it should because it's James Gunn. And
It's James Gunn, man.
The guy doesn't miss. Like, he just seems to get it.
We're doing All-Star Superman. He said that, right?
No, well, he said he's going to take some bits from that. He's not doing All-Star Superman. You can't start with All-Star Superman. He flies into the sun and dies. Like, you can't start there.
No. What I mean is he's taking elements. That's where he's taking.
Yeah, he's taking that era of Superman
yeah.
into the modern universe where it's going to be he's already been Superman, but it's kind of going to be his big, you know, like probably gonna do like the interview with Lois where he like tells the world who he is. Like they know of him, he's been around. People already are fans or haters of him, but he's gonna maybe have his first confrontation with Luthor, or Brainiac or Metallo or some big villain, and have his moment. I have a notion where they're gonna go.
Okay.
Hear me out. So you don't you cast a Lex Luthor, but he's a tertiary antagonist. Okay. You don't have him have a history with Clark like happened in like Smallville and modern comics canon. You don't have that history.
Right.
You have Lois as the reporter. Superman has been around. Clark is a new reporter at the Daily Planet. He's like her intern or whatever, like what they're doing in My Adventures with Superman. Very similar kind of setup where Lois is the senior of the two, and she should be. That's like the whole conceit there, right? It works really well for them as characters. And you have Superman coming out to the world, you know, like, this is who I am, this is my name, I'm Kal-El from Krypton, like, I'm an alien kind of stuff, right? That maybe they didn't know. They theorized, but didn't know. And you also then have Metallo show up, but he's being controlled by General Lane, who got the tech from Lex Luthor.
Okay.
And maybe it's Amanda Waller that put them together. So you set up a lot of the DC universe without very much storytelling necessary.
Yeah, because we know that
that'd be what I would do.
We know Amanda Waller is going to carry on in this universe.
Yeah, and that'd be a great way to kickstart Superman story, because we haven't really done Metallo in live. Like, shows have done it, but not in any movies. And I think it'd be a good villain because especially like he's never been exposed to kryptonite. You know, like showing the audience what that really looks like in canon, not the DCEU, where fucking Batman tried to kill him with it, right? Like, don't do that. They're gonna do more traditional kryptonite. You know, like I think that'd be really cool. Plus, you could do some James Gunn body horror stuff with Metallo. I think that fits James Gunn's, you know, work as a director better than most other villains, other than maybe Brainiac.
You can kind of feed that what he wanted to do with Brightburn, but he didn't go all the way with Brightburn, just a little bit more with this.
He did Brightburn?
He was a producer on it, wasn't he?
Yeah, he didn't direct it though.
No, but he was like one of the producers / writers of it.
Yeah. So I could see something like that. That'd be what I'm like. Ooh, that sounds like a great Superman movie to me.
I think you could go with a different baddie. You don't have to necessarily jump into Lex Luthor. I get.
That's why he's just in the background. He's not involved, and only the audience knows he's involved with Metallo.
Okay.
Kind of story where he's a in the shadows kind of character.
Bizarro we're not ready for Bizarro.
No,
maybe Brainiac, but then again, we're coming off of 8-9 years ago of Man of Steel. You know, where
like doing
we
a
have
whole
the alien,
it's an alien story. That's a bit much right out of the gate.
Yeah. We establish he's an alien living on this planet, trying to live within our world, right, and be our hero. We don't have to go all the way. I know I'm excited for Lobo.
But like, is it going to be Momoa or not? the Flash finale thing and the post-credit scene said, "Oh man, you're just always Aquaman, aren't you?" Right? Like he's talking to Jason Momoa, so it's like, is he staying Aquaman?
I think that was a joke. I think that was a
But
joke
like,
because
that's
that's Arthur. That may be Arthur
the
Curry
rumor
on the
was
world
he's
as a
staying as Lobo. He's going to be
yeah.
Lobo. But like, I don't know. I would almost rather him be Aquaman.
He's getting old, man. He you can hide him under makeup. You can hide that age under makeup
True.
with Lobo. I mean, you were able to get
And Lobo would be a
Batista,
better one-off kind of character than Aquaman.
but he doesn't have to. But Lobo doesn't have to be in a Superman. He can be
No, he
in
can be
a.
a Justice League story. He can be in a
Yep,
Martian Manhunter story. You know,
and he can just come and go. Like he can be just doing spot appearances as Lobo.
even
He
just a
doesn't have
cameo,
to. Yeah. Uh,
like a
I don't know,
Like a
man.
Green Lantern movie, and he's a cameo.
I really like the casting for Lois
Yeah,
and
the cast
Superman.
looks great. Like
Yep.
it's James Gunn. He said all the right things about like, honoring Superman's legacy as a character and like what he should mean to the universe that exists in the DC universe.
Yeah.
Like he should be the hero's hero. Like that's Superman. Like he
Do
is
you
what
find it
Captain America was in the MCU.
do you find it convenient that, just a day or two after week two's box office came out that he decides to announce here's our Superman
No,
of the
I'm
Flash.
sure
I'm
that's
sorry, week two of the Flash.
entirely coincidental.
Right,
He's
because
just like, hey,
you know,
we're shutting the door on this. Shh, shh, shh.
like pay no attention to that stuff. We've got good news for you. We've got our because everyone said if you're going to take over DC for us, what are you going to do with Superman, right? And then he
It's
stated,
it's the elephant in the room. Like you got
yeah.
to get Superman right. If you do, so many other things fall into place. You can't
I think
have
the
him
big
brooding opposite brooding Batman. That doesn't work.
I think the next big announcement is who's going to be the Batman.
Yeah, like you got to get the
Who's
Trinity. You got to have
yeah,
Batman and Wonder Woman. Like,
yeah.
and honestly, that would be a great tease too. Like, do two post credits. One is the stuff with, Waller and Luthor and General Lane, because you would set up General Lane as an antagonist. I
Mhm.
think not a, reluctant ally, like in Superman and Lois. And then the other is you're setting up the Trinity. I think you got to get that right too. And I think Gunn knows that. So it wouldn't shock me if that's right around the corner.
But you don't have to like go all in like you did with Dawn of Justice, where it all happened all at once. Like it
No,
just
no.
bombarded you. You could tease that there is a Gotham and that there's shit going on in Gotham. Like Amanda Waller tells
Yeah, like what the
Lois,
MCU
like,
used to do, like with the whole like Coulson rolling up on Thor's hammer kind of thing.
yeah,
Like it doesn't need to be characters talking to each other and I'm here to recruit you for the Avengers initiative and shit. It doesn't need to do that. You can just do it as setup stuff.
yeah. We know that Gotham is existing, and Waller's over there talking to Lois, saying, "I'm in Gotham dealing with some shit." Like, oh, okay, Gotham exists. That's a start.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
all right.
like start seeing like you gotta like Arrow in season one was like dropping like Bloodhaven and Stars and and Central City and Keystone and all these other
Yep,
places,
yep.
right? Like you got build that world out right, and I think he will because he said this in the I think it was the Rosenbaum podcast. He's like, what he loves about the DC universe is that it is an alt universe, right?
Yeah.
Like it's Metropolis, not New York. It's Gotham, not Detroit, right? Or New Jersey, right? Or Jersey City. Like it's, it's its own pocket universe that's not meant to be our universe, but with superheroes, kind of like what Marvel is. It's its own mythos and lore and canon and legends, and it's a different thing, you know. And it's like so that's really got me hyped for what James Gunn has in store.
Yeah.
So
All right, man. Well, this has been fun, man.
yeah,
A
it's been a
lot of
great
Star
episode.
Trek.
I love
A
talking
lot of
Trek.
Star
I could
Trek,
have a Star
and
Trek
then
show.
and then we ended with some DC.
Heck
Your
yeah,
favorite, a second
Legacy
favorite.
IP, baby. That's what I'm all about.
That's
Give me some of that century-old stuff. Which is crazy that Star Trek's, I think it's turning 58
Yeah.
this fall. And Superman's 38, right? 38 the first year? It was the 30s.
Was
I
it
want to say
30s?
late 30s.
I thought it was the 20s.
No, they grew up in the 20s. They grew up in the
Okay.
beginnings of the Depression.
Okay. 32. You're right. 32.
Yeah.
1932.
So, yeah. So, yeah, it was 32. So, it's coming up on 100 years of Superman, which is crazy. We're 91 years. So,
Actually, correction. 38. Because
38. I was right. I was right.
Action Commons 1938. You're correct. I was looking at when Schuster and Siegel met on a bio.
Yeah,
page.
they grew up. Yeah, 32 would be too early for them to have like grown up in the
38.
Depression. Yeah.
June 1938 was Action Comics #1.
Yeah.
So,
So I was right. I love being right. All right, well, we're gonna get out of here unless Fusion wants to play some Fortnite, but it sounds like he's got in-laws coming over.
yeah, family this weekend. It's the holiday, guys. Enjoy your holiday. Stay safe out there. Don't pop
Indeed.
any fireworks around dogs and veterans that have
Yeah,
PTSD.
hope
So,
everyone has a good weekend. Pathos, hope you do as well.
yep.
Obviously, I got to work Monday, which sucks. It's not a federal holiday. Tuesday is, and everybody else took the day off, so I don't get it. I don't get the 4-day weekend. But I have a thing to share with you that Joey told me. But my friend Joey, for the audience, told me some interesting stuff about who might be coming up to Britt, Iowa, of all places, for the Hobo Days, which is fucking crazy. So we'll talk about that, and I might have some stories to share in August if stuff happens with that. So thanks everyone for hanging. Of course, if you like this kind of thing, hit the like, hit the subscribe, leave us a review. Let us know what you thought of the episode. If you've watched Strange New Worlds, let us know what you thought of season 2. Your best episode so far. Trek as a whole. Does Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow belong on the Mount Rushmore of Star Trek episodes? Let us know why or why not. And we'll see you probably, what should we say, post Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it'll be the weekend of Mission Impossible's probably opening weekend. I'm going to go see it in IMAX in Des Moines. Go hang out with my sister, get some golf in, come back. Probably that Sunday as I'm looking at when our next episode will be. So it'll be about 2 weeks and a couple of days.
Yeah.
So, see ya.